Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda, and I am here with my January 2025 wrap-up. So if you've watched my channel for a while, you know I have sort of a format that I do this in. I've had to tweak this format a little bit for this year because I get my information off the spreadsheet I use, which is from the Currently Reading podcast for their Patreon members. And it's changed a little bit, which makes it a little harder to get some of the information. So I am not going to break out I'm not going to do a breakout of how many books I read in each genre in this. I don't know if people are really interested in that information, let me know. And I will try to do maybe like top 3 genres or something going forward. But if no one's really interested, it's not a big deal. But if people are interested, let me know. Otherwise, you'll see all the books that I've read this year. But let's get started. So in January, I read 17 books. 13 of those were fiction and 4 were nonfiction. I did DNF 2 books. The first one was The Life of Herod the Great by Zora Neale Hurston. It just didn't feel like a final draft to me. I don't know if Zora Neale Hurston would have wanted it published in that state. It just wasn't working. It's one of those things. I should know those posthumously unfinished works are usually not for me. And the second one I DNF'd was The Butterfly Lampshade by Aimee Bender. I just couldn't get into it. My average rating, now I have also this year changed to just using whole number ratings, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My rating scale is 5 is 5-star. 4 is 4 and 3 little asterisks by those two. 4, highly recommended. 3, recommended. 2, not recommended. 1, I wish I would have DNF'd. Now the little asterisks by 3 and 4. There are times when a 4-star book might just be recommended when I do this wrap up, or a 3-star might be highly recommended. Those two are a little bit fuzzier, but there you go. That's my star rating. So my average rating was 3.5, which is somewhere between recommended and highly recommended. So that's good. In format, 10 of my books were in print. 4 were ebooks, 2 were audiobooks, and 1 was a tandem. It was my Shakespeare play. As usual, I listened to it as I read it. So now I will go through everything I read, sort of in order of rating. And I always start with books that I call up in the air. So these are books that I haven't my feelings are still up in the air. I'm just still thinking about them. And this one I only have one, and that's Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. Done a whole video on this one. I'll link it below. Go watch it. That's what I thought of that book. As I said in that video, my original plan was to talk about it in this video, but this video would have been too long. So if you want to know my thoughts and why I'm still kind of up in the air about Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix, go look at that video. Now, as for books that I would not recommend, I only had one this month, and that is Quietly in Their Sleep by Donna Leone. This is number 6, 7, I already forgot, in the Commissario Brunetti series. I just didn't feel like this mystery worked at all. I thought it had a good premise, but it just didn't work as a mystery. Now, there's things in the series that are there that are good, like a great sense of place. I think Brunetti's an interesting character. That's all there, but it's a mystery novel. And I think in a mystery novel, you need to have the mystery work. And it just didn't work for me in that one. So that was the only one I would not recommend. Now, I have a number of books that I would recommend. The first one is 1,000 Moons by Sebastian Barry. The only reason why this is under recommended and not highly recommended is I really do feel that you need to read Days Without End first. And you actually should be reading those books as one work. There was someone so this was for my library book club, and there was someone in our book club who hadn't read Days Without End, and she enjoyed this, but she also, as we talked, realized that she missed a lot by not having read Days Without End. So recommended means I would recommend it to some people, or I would recommend it to everybody, like with caveats. So this is another case where 1,000 Moons got a 4 in my ratings, but it put it here because it really needed, the caveat is you need to have read Days Without End. So the second one I have is We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. I did end up really enjoying this book. I listened to it on audio. My issue was it took, at the 25% mark, I really wondered if I should DNF. It took a while to reel me in, which it's the beginning of a series, so you kind of need to have a little bit more time introducing characters. That's true, but it's also kind of a thrillery, so you need to be hooked at the beginning. So I don't know. I also felt like there were too many characters in this book, but there you go. So, but otherwise, I enjoyed the book, and that's We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. Oh, I got this out of order here. So then the next book I have under recommended is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. And this one I enjoyed. I mean, this was a 4-star right up until the end. And the only thing with me with the end was, one, I thought it wrapped up too neatly. And Sue Jackson, I buddy read this with her. She had a really good argument sort of against my feeling that it wrapped up too quickly, which was that, well, basically it was growth with the main character, and once these things happen for the main character, then things start to fall in place, which I do understand. Still felt like it wrapped up too quickly for me. And also there were some things at the end where I'm like, really? Yeah, really? You know, maybe it went a little too far with that. So there you go. But other than that, like, this was a 4-star up until that. But so it is definitely in the recommended, but maybe closer to the highly recommended category. And then I had another buddy read, and this is The Road of Bones by Demi Winter. This is the first romantasy I have ever read. And this is a little different because it's not a dragon romantasy, and it's also not a fairies effing romantasy. This is based more in Norse legend, which I really enjoyed, because I do actually really enjoy Norse legend. And I enjoyed my time reading this book. It felt YA except for the sex. It is spicy. And I think that might be, from what I have talked to with other people who read romantasy and people who enjoy romantasy. So this is not like them knocking romantasy, but they have mentioned this, that lots of times the books feel like YA except for the spiciness. So maybe that is just a typical thing with romantasy. But there was a recurring motif of like the main character not being truthful that got old quickly. And there was a development towards the end of the book, which was good, but I think very unearned. This is a first in a duology. I still haven't decided if I'm going to read on in it. As again, I enjoyed my time with it. It was, I had my issues too. So we'll see. If I do read on, I'm not getting the hardcover. I'm just going to get it from the library. And then in recommended, I had my Shakespeare, Antony and Cleopatra. And it's a little unfair putting this here because my issue with I had 2 issues with Antony and Cleopatra. One, I think, is actually a critique, which is I just was really disappointed in the character of Cleopatra. I expected a much stronger character. I know Shakespeare can write those characters. And it wasn't with Cleopatra, but I think of all the Shakespeare characters, that's the one that should be that way. She was just more like sort of a lovesick, simpering sex bot, I guess, is the way to describe her. So that was annoying. But the other thing isn't really a critique. It's just sort of a fact. It's just sort of a fact about this. I think this is a better play on stage than it is on the page. Better on stage than on the page. Not a critique, because Shakespeare didn't write these plays to be read. He wrote them to be performed and seen. And it's not a failure of this play to be better on stage than it is on paper. Now, there are some of his, like Othello, which are just as good on the page, and that's great, but that probably wasn't his main focus. I mean, he's trying to write things that make good performances. So that's just a fact of this book. It's not a critique. But really my only issue was that Cleopatra was kind of annoying. And then I had the best American short stories of 2024. Usually, so it's hard with short story, especially collections, but especially anthologies where you have a number of different authors. And anthologies can vary. Sometimes the stories are tied together with a theme, but in these, they're tied together by their American. And I'm a little questioning about them being published in 2024 because I came across 2 stories in here that I had read in collections from the authors that were published 2023 or earlier. So I'm not sure how that works, but whatever. So it's a little hard to kind of rate these. The reason I put this in recommended instead of highly recommended is just with any collection, there's some stories that work better than others. This one seemed to tip a little bit more towards the stories not working. There were some really great stories in here, don't get me wrong. It's just if I had to, measure it out, it kind of went a little bit. Still worth reading. One thing I would say about these collections is, they have a different editor every year. The last year's was Min Jin Lee, and this year, that one worked a lot better for me. The stories, Min Jin Lee just has a different focus than Lauren Groff does, and that's fine. The Best American Mysteries and Suspense that I'm reading right now are edited by S.A. Cosby, and last year they were Lisa Unger, and they're very different. And I can see why this year's was S.A. Cosby's. You know what I mean? I can see the influence of the editor. So I think my kind of feeling with this is if you know who the editor is and kind of like you like their books, you're kind of like have a better success rate with these collections. So, and that's not to say I have not read enough Lauren Groff to say whether or not I've liked her. I have actually liked some of her short stories. As far as books, I think the only one I've read so far is Fates and Furies, which I hated. So very good. I know. And then I had Lost Children Archive. I read this for Mariann at Books and Bocadillos Book Club. So basically with this one, it's another case of the first 2/3 to 3/4, probably 2/3, really worked for me, and then it didn't. There is a change of narrator at that point. So there's 4 characters in this book: mother, father, boy, girl. And the boy is 10 and the girl is 5 or 6. And the bulk of the book is narrated by the mother, and that worked for me. But when it switched to the boy being the narrator, because he's the other narrator, I didn't find that voice very authentic. In that it was both seemed too old and too young to be a 10-year-old boy, if that makes sense. It just didn't seem realistic to me. I did feel like maybe she was trying to tackle too many issues with here too. All that being said, wonderful writing. I mean, she is Luiselli is a wonderful writer, and there were very sad, very moving, poignant, even some very funny points in this book. It just, was an uneven book for me, but I would still recommend it. I think just on the strength of the writing alone, I would recommend it. And then this is the one where you're either in the club or you're not, and that is Beautiful Ugly. And you're either an Alice Feeney person or you're not, and I don't think I'm an Alice Feeney person. I know people who loved this book, and I'm glad. That's wonderful. I'm glad. I just don't think that I'm the person for this book. It was the story got a little out of Feeney's control, and the resolution was a little hard to take. But other people have loved it, so I'm wrapping this up me not being an Alice Feeney person. And my final book that I'd recommend is Divine Might, Goddesses in Greek Myth by Natalie Haynes. I enjoyed this. It's very fun. She goes in and she does a deep dive on the major Greek goddesses. My only caveat with this is it's not really a beginner book for going into Greek mythology. It does assume some pre-knowledge of the myths to really get going. But other than that, it's a great book. Okay, now we have 4 books that are highly recommended, and I have one of them here. If I were patient and waiting until this afternoon, I might have 2 of them because the other one's supposed to arrive today because I read it on ebook and then I'm getting print. But we'll get to that. These are my highly recommended books. The first one is Death Comes as the End by Agatha Christie. This is a very unique Agatha Christie novel. It is set in ancient Egypt. Lots of family drama. I did find the viewpoint character annoying, but there's so many other things in this book that, it was annoying, but it wasn't a big deal to me. Really, really interesting take. If you've read, if you've never read Agatha Christie, I would not recommend starting with this because it is so different from everything else. But if you've been reading Agatha Christie, give this one a try for something completely different. I thought it was a strong mystery. Characters were well done. The dynamics between the characters is really what makes this a successful novel. This is the only sort of historical novel like this that Agatha Christie wrote, which is a little bit of a shame because it was so good. So yeah, I would say Death as rank. I mean, I do not rank my Agatha Christie novels at this point. In a different video, I will get into that. But if I were, this would, as of right now, be my second favorite Agatha Christie novel behind And Then There Were None. And then I have a new series that bookish best friend bullied me into trying. She doesn't watch this video, so I can say these things about her. One of these days she'll be watching it. She'll say, I heard what you said about me. But this is A Killer in King's Cove by Iona Whishaw. This is the first in the Lane Winslow series. This is a historical mystery series set in British Columbia right after World War II. Lane Winslow was sort of an agent, spy-ish person for the Allies during the war, but she just wanted to give it up. So she moved, she saw a poster of British Columbia and decided she wanted to move there. So she moves there and then murders happen. It has been described as being for people who love the Maisie Dobbs series. And I say it has been described as that because I have not yet read the Maisie Dobbs series. I have the first Maisie Dobbs book, but I haven't read it yet. I have read, and I've already forgotten the name of that book, but Jacqueline Winspear wrote another, it's not a Maisie Dobbs book, and it might be, I'm going to put the title of it here. It might be the start of a new series. I don't know, but it was a lot like that. So I do think the comparison to Maisie Dobbs is a good one, but I really enjoyed it. Yeah, because I just needed another series to follow. And then I have, this was from the library and I returned the book already. And that is for Angelia's Endless Drama Book Club where we read plays. And this is Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw. This was a reread for me. I read it years ago, mostly because I love the musical My Fair Lady. But this was really interesting to read with a more critical eye. There were things that I definitely picked up on this that I didn't the first time I read it. I was much younger and reading it for different reasons. It's a really easy play to get into. So if you're never really been a play reader, but you want to give it a try, this is not a bad one to start with, especially if you've seen My Fair Lady, because you kind of already know the story. And it's easy. It's an easy play to read. Some plays are not easy to read. This one was an easy play to read, but I really enjoyed rereading this one. So thank you, Angelia, for getting me to do that. And then my final highly recommended was How We Learn to Be, this is the one that's coming today, How We Learn to Be Brave, Decisive Moments in Life and Faith by Mariann Edgar Budde. She is the bishop of the diocese, the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, D.C. And I will have either tomorrow, Wednesday, or Friday, a Books for the Spirit video talking about this. Because as I said, I was just waiting to get my hard copy because it's going to be kind of easier for me to pull things out that way than doing it with an e-copy. So if you are interested to know what I thought of that beyond it being highly recommended, do check out that video when it comes out. Now, as for 5 stars, 5 stars are fantastic. Probably one of my all-time favorite books, perfect books, whatever. I had 2 this month. In the first one, before I was filming this, like right before I started filming this video, I was watching Heidi at My Reading Life and her do a review of this book. So I think I can pronounce the author's name now. But this is World of Wonders by Aimee Netsukamatl. I hope I did that right. I think I got that. This is an essay collection. The author is a poet. I'm not going to try to say her name again. Like once was hard. She's a poet, so you can tell that in her prose. But basically, she takes different creatures, usually fauna, sometimes flora, and uses it as a jumping off point to make sort of autobiographical memoirs. And they are just absolutely beautiful and lovely. I adored this book. I actually had a library copy of it and then ordered a copy as soon as I finished it because I knew that I wanted this on my shelf and that I will be rereading it in the future. So this was for the Book Naturalist Book Club. And I'm really excited to finally get my rear in gear and read books with them. But I loved this. It was good for the spirit. It's not a books for the spirit because that's a different thing, but it was good for my spirit to read this. So those were the editing Melinda here. I completely forgot to tell you because I missed one. My other 5-star book was A Lovely One by Ketanji Brown Jackson. I talked about this in length in my last weekly wrap up, so you can see that there. I'll link it down below. I'm not going to go into it here because I'm holding my arm up and my arm's going to get tired, but I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that in this video. Read this. So those were the 17 books I read this month. Let me go through for read-alongs and events that did. So I'm going to This might not be a completely fair entry into this, but I'm counting this for Historathon 2025. And I know mythology is not really history, but it is sort of a reflection of what people believed at the time in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, because she talks about the Roman mythology as well. So it's not going to be the only thing I read for this quarter for Historathon, but I'm going to count it for Historathon. And then, of course, for the Book Naturalist Book Club. And then, as I said, I had 2 buddy reads. They're right here. 2 buddy reads. First, it was Writers and Lovers by Lily King with Sue Jackson. And then it was The Road of Bones by Demi Winters with commenter Katie Sykes. So Katie and I are currently doing another buddy read. So we'll be hearing about that soon. And then we're going to get to the scary part of this, like where I'm doing with my stats. So I do set a reading goal every year, and it's not a goal to strive for. Like, I set this number not in an idea to strive for it, but I'm trying to find that sweet spot where I'm going to like meet this goal in like the second half of December, just to kind of see where it is. And I also kind of use it to kind of keep myself out of slumps. That's why I set this goal. Last year it was 165 and I blew past it. So I'm going to try 175 this year. Again, I'm just trying to find that sweet spot. 17 books puts me 1 ahead of schedule at the end of the month. Actually, I think it might've put me 2 ahead of schedule at the end of the month, but I'm doing this on the 3rd of February. And I think now it might've gone to 1. So it's 1 or 2 ahead of schedule. And now the scary part. So as I have said so many times, one of my goals for last year, which I failed miserably, and again for this year, was to end the year with at least 1 less book on my owned TBR than I started the year with. So my owned TBR count, these are books that I own but have not read, is currently 877, which is up 14. Now we're in January. Well, this was January. We're in February now. All is not lost. All is not lost. That was a warning shot. I need to buckle down and kind of get to it. It's going to be fine. Here we go. But it didn't start out well. Now in the past, up until this year, I've broken it down in between like ebook and print, ebook and print. And I was kind of ignoring audio. However, this year I am going to include audio in it. So my print, I'm currently at 317, which is up 13. My ebook, I'm up 494, which is up 2. In my defense, if you've seen my book haul, which you haven't because it hasn't come out yet, but I filmed it. I've decided to join in on the Arabian Nights readathon, and I got all 3 volumes of the Arabian Nights on Kobo. So that was like 3 in 1, which would actually put me down 1 if you counted it that way, but whatever. And if you break it down, I'm at 128 books on my Kindle. That's the same where I was. And Kobo 366, I'm up 2. Now for audio, I have 65 titles. But that's down 1. So at least in one category, I went down 1. I have 15 books on Audible, and there's not really a change on that. Audible's a little weird. Most of what I listen to on Audible is bedtime stories, and those are things I've already read, so they don't count in this. But I do the year where you get all the credits at once. And so that may change as we get into the BookTube prize. I am not judging the first round of the BookTube prize because I figured out last year that, the first round is February and March, and I'm always gone for at least a week in March. So that makes the time I have to read shorter. So I'm just going to start in the second round. But as we get into it, I might start using some of those credits. I've been saving Libro credits, but it just works out that way. And as for Libro, I'm at 50. I am down 1 on Libro. So there you go. It's not all scary. And again, it's January. It's just a warning shot. We can do this. But that was my month. So my January book haul is coming out on Thursday. My Books for the Spirit will either be out tomorrow or Friday. We'll see. I'm going to film it today, and we'll see when I get it edited. And so yes, so that's where I am. How was your January? January was a hard month. January is just always a hard month. Like, it just seems like a long, hard month. I generally like Januaries because it's like fresh start. did not like this January because the world, well, the United States, I should say, is a dumpster fire. But my reading was good. And that's something I can control. So that's a win. Anyway, like, subscribe, join my Discord. Tell me if you have any thoughts on these, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.